"He's in the wrong room," someone said. The kitchen staff meets downstairs. The words slice through the morning air like a knife, sharp, dismissive, and final. They hung in the polished conference room where 50 of the company's most powerful executives sat in leather chairs, worth more than a month's wages for most people. The speaker, a woman in a flawless navy suit with manicured nails, didn't even glance up from her tablet as she delivered the job. Elias Moore stood silently at the back, a worn manila folder clutched in his rough hands. The folder's edges were soft from years of use, its corners bent from being carried in his jacket pocket through countless shifts. His clothes told a story everyone in the room recognized but pretended not to see. A faded denim shirt with tiny holes near the collar, khaki pants washed to near white, steel-toed boots marked by decades of labor. The fluorescent lights above carved harsh shadows across his face, revealing every line left by work and worry. At 51, Elias looked older than his years. His dark hair was streaked with premature silver, his skin tanned by a lifetime under harsh industrial lights. And his hands, calloused, scarred, and honest, spoke for him. They were the hands of a builder, a fixer, a man who had earned every crease and bruise. Laughter rippled through the room, low, cruel, and knowing. The kind of laughter born from privilege. "Security really needs to tighten up," muttered David Rothschild, the chief financial officer, adjusting a silk tie worth more than Elias's weekly paycheck. "These people think they can just wander in anywhere," he added. Margaret Chen, the VP of operations, smirked without looking up. "Probably here to complain about overtime again. They never understand business decisions." "Or maybe he's lost," chuckled another voice. "Happens all the time." The laughter that followed was soft but cutting, the sound of people secure in their superiority. Elias heard every word. He always did. It wasn't the first time, not even the 100th. He'd heard it in bank offices when denied loans, in classrooms where other parents edged away when they learned he worked with his hands, and at company parties where executives toasted profits built on his labor. The sting never faded. But he'd learned to swallow it, to let it burn quietly inside and fuel something deeper. Burlington Industries headquarters loomed like a monument to power, 60 stories of glass and steel stretching skyward, a mirror of the class divide it thrived on. The executive floors were opulent, imported Italian furniture, modern art, and panoramic views of the city below. Even the air seemed richer up here. The conference table, a single slab of mahogany, probably cost more than most people's cars. Portraits of former CEOs lined the walls, all men, all white, all wearing the same expression of inherited confidence. It didn't escape Elias that this meeting room, this temple of capitalism, was paid for by the sweat of people who'd never be allowed to set foot in it. Outside, the city stirred. Far below, people hustled to jobs that barely paid the bills, riding packed trains, skipping breakfast, grabbing cheap coffee, all to make men like these richer. Burlington Industries employed over 50,000 people, manufacturing everything from auto parts to appliances. It was the kind of success story politicians loved. An American dream built on sacrifice, layoffs, and exploited labor. The executives around the table were the self-proclaimed best and brightest. Margaret Chen, the efficiency expert who'd built her career on cutting jobs. David Rothschild, the numbers man who'd closed factories and offshored work to keep profits high. Jennifer Walsh, the PR magician who spun human tragedy into strategic restructuring. Each wore success like armor, untouched by the ruin their decisions caused. They thought this was just another quarterly meeting, reviewing profits, approving bonuses, and plotting how to squeeze more from less. None of them realized the man in the back had been studying them for years. Elias knew them all. He knew Margaret's $12 million home in Connecticut, Rothschild's Friday night table at Le Bernardin, and Jennifer Walsh's glowing Forbes profile. He knew the plant Rothschild closed in Michigan, where his brother-in-law had worked 18 years. Was shut down with 3 weeks' notice. He knew those workplace incidents in Ohio were really preventable deaths caused by neglected safety gear, but they didn't know him. For 23 years, Elias had built, repaired, and improved the very systems that made these people rich. He'd saved the company millions with his ideas. Yet to them, he was invisible, just another name on a payroll sheet. That was about to change. As the room filled with quiet chatter and imported coffee, someone muttered, Maybe he's here to fix something. Air conditioning's been acting up. Margaret smirked again. More likely looking for work? You know how they get when layoffs start. The word layoffs drifted through the room like a breeze, light, casual, meaningless. But to Elias it meant faces and names. His neighbor Mike, who lost his job to automation. Sarah Thompson, the single mother laid off 6 months ago, now working 2 jobs to survive. For them, layoffs weren't numbers. They were lives torn apart. Elias looked around the room at the people who'd never dirtied their hands and gripped the folder tighter. He hadn't come to complain. He hadn't come to beg. He'd come to be heard. Part-time jobs with no benefits. Working 60 hours a week for less than she made in 40 at Burlington. Layoffs had become a family story now. His own brother-in-law, Tony, was among the casualties. 18 years at the Michigan plant. Then a cardboard box and an escort out the door. 6 months of job hunting later, Tony ended up at Walmart, making half of what Burlington once paid him. His son had to quit college. Tuition was no longer possible. But to the people in this room, layoffs were just numbers. I heard they're planning another round of cuts in the second quarter, someone whispered. Something about maximizing efficiency before the merger talks heat up. Makes sense, David Rothschild replied, nodding. Clean up the balance sheet. Improve margins. Standard procedure. Standard procedure. The phrase made Elias's jaw tighten. These people treated human suffering like a line item on a quarterly report. The folder in his hands held documents that would change everything. But not yet. The moment wasn't right. Patience had been Elias's only weapon, forged through decades of being ignored, underestimated, dismissed. Today, that patience was about to pay off in a way none of these executives could imagine. Near the front, CEO James Wellington reviewed his notes. The company's official story called him a self-made man, a visionary who transformed Burlington Industries from a regional manufacturer into a global giant. What it didn't mention were the trust fund, the Ivy League education paid with family money, and the powerful connections that smoothed every step of his rise. His assistant, Bradley, a nervous kid fresh out of Northwestern, leaned in to whisper something. Wellington's eyes flicked toward the back, landing on Elias. For a second, something shifted in his expression. Not recognition, but awareness. Then it was gone. Instincts were for other people, not for men like Wellington. Outside, the city pulsed awake. Traffic flowed like blood through veins, carrying people to jobs they couldn't afford to lose. Inside, 50 of the most powerful figures in American manufacturing gathered, men and women whose decisions shaped entire communities. And in the back stood a man they'd never truly seen, holding a folder that would upend their world. Should we call someone? Jennifer Walsh whispered. I'm sure it's fine, said Margaret Chen, waving dismissively. Probably maintenance. These people. The words rolled off her tongue with practiced indifference. To her, Elias wasn't a man with a family or dreams, just one of those people, invisible until needed. For Elias, that casual cruelty had been building inside for 23 years. Every ignored idea, every passed-over promotion, every safety risk brushed aside for bonuses. And now, it had led him here. The folder in his hands held stock certificates, legal documents, and transfer papers. The proof of a plan 15 years in the making. A plan so deliberate, so methodical, that none of the so-called brilliant minds in this room had seen it coming. He'd started small, a few shares whenever he could spare the money after mortgage payments, school fees, and hospital bills. He studied Burlington's financial reports, watched the markets, and learned the system better than the people who ran it. When the stock crashed 18 months ago, after safety violations and fines the company tried to bury, Elias saw opportunity. He mortgaged his house, borrowed from his 401k, and poured everything he had into buying shares at rock-bottom prices. Executives saw a setback. Elias saw his moment. The stock rebounded. Burlington recovered. But the profits didn't go to them, not this time. During that downturn, Elias Moore had quietly become Burlington's largest individual shareholder. And last night, less than 12 hours ago, he'd exercised his final option, taking controlling interest in the company. The papers in his folder made him, legally and officially, the new owner of Burlington Industries. Nobody in the room knew it yet. As the sunlight shifted across the conference table, Wellington stood, adjusting his Italian silk tie and checking his Rolex. a watch worth more than 6 months of an average worker's pay. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice confident and practiced, "thank you for being here. We have a full agenda today, and I know everyone's time is valuable." Valuable. As if time itself carried a price tag, different for each person in the room. Before we begin, he reached back into the folder and pulled out a thick stack of documents bound in blue. Burlington Industries has 47 million shares outstanding. As of Friday's close, the stock traded at $68.43, giving us a market cap of about $3.2 billion. Vanguard holds 8%, BlackRock 6.3%, State Street 4.8%. The largest individual shareholders, James Wellington with 2.4%, the Wellington Family Trust with 1.8%, and David Rothschild with 1.2%. The color drained from Wellington's face. But as of 11:47 p.m. last night, Elias continued, I exercised my option to purchase an additional 12 million shares at $42 per share. Combined with the shares I've quietly accumulated over the past 15 years, that gives me ownership of roughly 26.3 million shares. Wellington whispered. That's over 50%. 56, Elias corrected softly. A controlling interest. The silence that followed was absolute. 50 executives all realizing the same thing. Their world had just changed forever. As of last night, Elias said calmly, I became the majority owner of Burlington Industries. Margaret let out a strangled gasp. Rothschild's voice broke. That's over $1 billion. You can't? There's no way. You're right, David, I couldn't pay cash. So I arranged financing. He held up another paper, this one bearing the Goldman Sachs letterhead. When you control a profitable company, banks are eager to lend. Goldman was happy to provide a $1.2 billion facility at prime plus 2%. The debt is secured by Burlington's own future. He paused. The math works beautifully. Burlington generates $400 million in free cash flow annually, enough to service the loan and still fund the reforms I plan to make. This is impossible, Wellington sputtered. The SEC, there are disclosure requirements. Already filed, Elias said. All legal. Cravath, Swain & Moore handled the paperwork. I believe you know them, Jim. They've been your firm for years. Wellington's face crumpled. How? Jennifer Walsh finally asked, her voice trembling. How did you plan this? Elias looked at her with something close to pity. I've been planning this for 15 years. 15 years of watching you destroy lives for quarterly bonuses. 15 years of studying your reports, your compensation plans, your every move. Learning your system so I could use it against you. You made one fatal mistake. He looked around the table. You assumed that because I work with my hands I must be ignorant. That because I wear a work jacket instead of an Armani suit, I couldn't possibly understand how business works. You assumed people like me don't matter. Margaret tried to steady her voice. Even if this is true, you can't just walk in here and take control. There's a board, there's 56% of the voting shares, Elias cut in. Which means there's me. And then there's everyone else. And everyone else just became irrelevant. The weight of his words settled on them like a storm cloud. For the first time, the people who'd spent their lives deciding others' fates realized what it felt like to lose control. This is insane. Martinez snapped, standing. I don't care who you are. I'm not sitting here listening to this. Thomas, Elias said evenly, if you walk out that door, consider it your resignation. Your contract includes a 2-year non-compete clause, but if you sit down we can discuss your future under new management. Martinez froze. Then slowly he sat back down. The balance of power had shifted completely. The masters of the boardroom were now the ones taking orders from a man they had once dismissed as invisible. Thank you, Elias said politely. Now let's discuss the changes that are going to be implemented effective immediately. He opened his folder one more time and pulled out what appeared to be a prepared agenda. First, executive compensation. The combined salaries and bonuses of the 50 executives in this room last year totaled approximately $230 million. That's more than the combined wages of the 3,000 workers whose jobs Margaret eliminated in the name of operational efficiency. Margaret flinched as if she'd been slapped. Effective immediately, executive salaries will be capped at 15 times the median worker salary. Based on current wage levels, that means the maximum executive salary will be approximately $750,000 annually. No bonuses, no stock options, no golden parachutes. The room erupted in protests. But Elias raised his hand and silence fell immediately. Second, healthcare and benefits. Every Burlington Industries employee will receive full healthcare coverage with no deductibles, no copays, and no coverage limitations. Pension contributions will be restored to pre-208 levels. Vacation time will be increased to 4 weeks annually for all employees regardless of tenure. David Rothschild's voice was strangled. The cost would be enormous. It would destroy our profitability. It would reduce our profitability by approximately 12%, Elias corrected, which would still leave Burlington Industries significantly more profitable than our closest competitors. The difference is that the profits would be shared with the people who actually generate them, instead of being concentrated among the people who manage them. Third, workplace safety. All safety training programs that have been eliminated will be restored immediately. Safety equipment will be upgraded to exceed OSHA requirements, not merely meet them. Any manager who pressures workers to skip safety protocols will be terminated immediately. Jennifer Walsh was shaking her head frantically. The shareholders will never accept this. You can't just I am the shareholders, Elias reminded her quietly. 56% of them anyway. And I'm not interested in maximizing short-term profits at the expense of human lives. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each executive individually. Fourth, plant closures and layoffs. The Michigan plant will be reopened within 6 months. Every worker who was laid off will be offered their job back at their previous salary, plus a raise to account for inflation. Workers who have found other employment will be given 6 months to make the transition back if they choose to. Wellington's voice was hoarse. The cost of reopening Michigan, it would cost hundreds of millions. It would cost approximately $60 million to open the Michigan plant, Elias corrected, which is less than you spent on executive bonuses last year. It's also less than Burlington Industries spends annually on marketing campaigns designed to convince people that we care about American workers. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Fifth, environmental compliance. Burlington Industries will exceed all environmental regulations by a minimum of 20%. We will invest in clean energy systems for all our facilities within 5 years. We will take responsibility for cleaning up the environmental damage we've caused in communities where we operate. Thomas Martinez was staring at Elias as if he were seeing him for the first time. You're talking about completely restructuring the entire company. The complexity, the implementation challenges. It would take years. It would take approximately 18 months to fully implement these changes, Elias said. I've had 15 years to plan this transition. Every detail has been worked out. Every cost has been calculated. Every potential obstacle has been anticipated. He smiled. And for the first time, it was a genuinely warm smile. You see, while you were all focused on quarterly earnings and stock prices, I was focused on building a company that could actually serve the people who work for it. A company that could be profitable while still being humane. A company that could succeed without destroying lives. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. The silence of people trying to process a completely new reality. Now, Elias continued, let's talk about your futures with Burlington Industries. The tension ratcheted up again immediately. Some of you will be leaving the company, not because you're bad people, but because you've demonstrated that you're incapable of seeing employees as human beings rather than cost centers. Margaret, David, Jennifer, your resignations will be effective at the end of this meeting. The 3 named executives looked as if they'd been physically struck. Others of you will have the opportunity to stay and help build something better. Thomas, your technology initiatives have actually been quite good when they've been focused on improving working conditions rather than eliminating jobs. I'd like you to stay and help implement some of the systems we'll need. Martinez nodded slowly, still looking stunned. The rest of you will have 60 days to demonstrate that you can adapt to a management philosophy that values human dignity over quarterly profits. Those who can make that transition will have a place in the new Burlington Industries. Those who can't will receive generous severance packages and excellent references. Wellington raised his hand like a schoolchild, asking for permission to speak. What about me? Hesked quietly. Elias looked at him for a long moment, and something in his expression softened slightly. Jim, you're a complicated case. You're not a bad person, but you've been a bad leader. You've allowed this company to become something that destroys the lives of the people who work for it. But you also built something impressive, and there might be a place for you in what comes next. Wellington's eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hide. I'd like you to stay for now, not as CEO. That position is being eliminated. But as a senior advisor, help me understand the parts of this business that I don't know yet. Help me avoid the mistakes that good intentions can sometimes lead to. And if I refuse, Wellington asked, then you'll receive a severance package worth $50 million and an excellent reference letter. But Jim, I hope you'll stay because I think you remember what it was like to believe that B